everybody. This is the 3D Printer Chat podcast. I'm your host, Chris Garrett, and I'm here today with Luis Rodriguez, who works for Ultimaker, which, as everybody knows, is one of the biggest 3D printing concerns in the world. How are you doing, Luis?
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what is it you do for Ultimaker?
So I'm part of a 3-person team that makes up the community team. Matthew Griffin is the director. Liz Aram is a community strategist that focuses on education. And I'm a community strategist that focuses on business. But we all sort of help each other and cross over. And we're part of the North American side of Ultimaker. So there's 250 employees over in the Netherlands. We represent the U.S. side. So our headquarters are in Boston. But we have offices in New York. That's where Matt and Liz live. I work in the Midwest in Kansas City, and then we have 2 others in California and San Francisco. So between those folks, we help take care of U.S. customers and resellers.
So do you work from home, or are you at an office? Or?
So a little bit of both. I work from home, and then I have a co-working space. And then the other times we're traveling to events.
Right. So were you at the event this week? I saw on the Ultimaker social media there was an event yesterday, I think.
Oh, so yeah. So 3 of our folks are at West Tech right now. So we do divide and conquer. Some will go to certain events, and we load balance that way. Cool.
So will you be at the Midwest Rep Rap event next time?
I will, because the funny part of it is it's always during my wife's birthday, and so I could never make it. But I've been assured that he moved it, I think, because of the scale of the event, maybe 2 weeks or something. I don't know if that's confirmed, but I do hope to be there. I think my next event will actually be Maker Faire in New York at the end of next week.
That looks so awesome. I need to go to both, but maybe next year, 2018.
Yeah.
So is that kind of a lot of what you do? You go out and you meet and greet people, or is it more online?
So it's a mixture. So the events is definitely part of it. So we either will have a booth in an event in a certain industry or trade, or we'll travel. We've been doing road shows in sort of geographic areas. So we went to Portland and Seattle area, and we'll do a meetup. We'll meet with customers that we know are in the area or have discovered. People just like to put a name and a face to the company, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't just exist online. I do try to participate as much as I can online, a couple Facebook groups. We have a forum. Yeah. It's hard to be everywhere. I don't get time for Reddit, for example. I know there's a huge group there.
Yeah. And your focus is on business, right? So it's not so much the consumer side that Reddit would be focusing on.
Sure. So that is my focus. So I try and find good use cases, share those stories. But the community is the community. So we may see somebody and they might self-identify as a maker, but they work for a big corporation and use 3D printing. Yeah. So what we find is a lot of these champions do this in a bigger setting. Not everyone's a hobbyist. At work, they might be using it for architecture or who knows.
Yeah. And it's the same in education, right? You'll get a champion of a professor or a teacher who then brings it into the establishment.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we've we use that sort of concept to create this Pioneers program, which you can see on the website. And it's exactly that. Teachers of all makes and models that use every sort of printer, just sharing what they've done, because there's no reason for us to try and act like we've created the ultimate curriculum. It's already out there being done by these teachers. So, and those teachers thrive in a community that wants to share. So it just makes sense to share what they're already doing.
Yeah. So talking about the community and sharing, Ultimaker is still open source, correct?
Right. So we'll share the hardware specs. Cura is still open, so that's why you're still seeing it being adopted by other manufacturers. So what I wanted to say is the other part of our job is just that sort of business intelligence. What are people having problems with, or what are we seeing in the marketplace, or what are people interested in? Are they all of a sudden doing a lot's molding casting, and that varies from industry to industry. It's kind of insane, really. You have a tool that can theoretically do anything, so it's hard to have a project that an educator, an artist might do interests an architect or engineer, but sometimes they overlap.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just about inspiring people with what's possible, and that triggers other innovations.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yep.
So we've been having a debate in the 3D printing community about open source, and my take on it is that embracing open source can only help a company. Now, Ultimaker, you said there's like 250 employees. That's in a different place in the market than the smaller, maybe Chinese manufacturers that are like the bulk of their employees are manufacturing and assembling. You have a lot more capability and resource. So why does Ultimaker still embrace open source?
Well, it's part of their DNA. I mean, it literally started with 3 guys in a fab lab working on a project. They were early RepRap core founder, developers, participants, whatever. And we've heard this many times. You just thought, hey, I think I might be able to do this or that a better way. And, early on, the Ultimaker did not have a screen that came from a user, did not have its own software, which was Cura. So they've grown continually, and that it just makes sense. There's no reason to try and close that. So the community has built it. So you can have the best product in the world. If nobody's talking about it or participating or say, hey, I figured out a new way to do something, let's incorporate that in the Cura. It doesn't matter. I mean, the community literally is, the heartbeat of the corporation.
Yeah.
And you're not going to lie. There's different flavors, and I don't pretend to understand all of the different open source licensing and things myself. I just know that when the community sort of has a voice in decisions, it's useful. I mean, this happens in for-profit companies too.
Yeah.
If companies are listening to their customers, instead of the company saying, I think you need this feature, and then people are like, no, I don't use that at all.
Yeah, it's grassroots rather than top down. And one of the things that I think I take from this as well, it's Ultimaker as part of the community instead of being dictating to the community. And I've had the opposite of the experience of open source, where it's completely closed source. I have a printer that basically is useless now because the company, I'll not mention the name, left the consumer market. And the software's proprietary, the firmware's proprietary, even the filament's proprietary. They have like cartridges. When they have a cloud system that they don't develop anymore and they're not fixing bugs, it's like, what is the point? And so that whole open source thing is almost like insurance that you'll always be able to use your machine. Right.
And so currently in the Ultimaker 3, I'd say we have sort of a hybrid. You can, if you want, use our spools that have an NFC chip and the computer reads it, the printer. But that's an assistive technology. That just helps the printers set up. But if you have XYZ, ABC filament, you can just tell the printer, okay, I put PLA.
Yeah.
It's an assistive technology. It should help you if you use our hardware, software, materials together, but it's still an open system so that you can run whatever you want through it, for better or worse. So I think there's a good balance. People want to create a certain experience and a level of success, at least to get started, and then you can go crazy and experiment with whatever you want.
Yeah, and like in a education or even like a makerspace, being able to just put on a spool and not have to worry about all the configuration and settings and calibrations, that's amazing. The fact that you're not tied into it makes it the best of both worlds. You can experiment, new filaments come out, you know.
Well, right. I mean, so an example, in Cura is you can just do the quick presets, but then at some point you're going to have to customize something for some particular feature, and then you can go into the advanced settings or customize and whatever, change parameters and things like that.
So how did you get involved with Ultimaker? Were you an Ultimaker customer, or did you just come through the maker community? Because you're a graphic designer, right?
Right. So my background out of school is graphic design. I worked for a TV station and then a communications department. So it's a little bit of both. I started it as I worked for a foundation called the Coffin Foundation, and they concentrate on entrepreneurship and education. And at the time, they had some PhD students that were doing startups, and a couple of them were hardware oriented, and they wanted to produce prototypes. And so we did the traditional thing that every company does. We demoed a large industrial machine, and the company ultimately decided that was way too much money for all of it, leasing and maintenance. And I said, hey, there's a new company called MakerBot, and they have this thing called a cupcake. Let's try that. That was 2010-ish. And so we did. And, not the greatest, but this was the only thing available. And
was that when it was using fishing line?
No, this was still 4 threaded rods.
Oh, okay.
1 belt for the Z, just very rudimentary. We certainly weren't doing 40-hour prints, but this was the future.
Yeah.
This was, hey, we can make prototypes. Anyway, the only reason I mention that is that was the first part of me participating in a community. So I joined the local hackerspace, went to Maker Faire, and about that same time, I noticed Ultimaker as well. I think they showed their first machine, which was called the Proto Box, at an event in New York City called Boticon 0. And Eric De Bruin was there, one of the founders. And then from every year after that, I would see them progress at Maker Faire. I was still an existing MakerBot user. I then got a Thingamatic. And then I went far left field and got an Up printer, which I thought was pretty pivotal at the time for software. And then years later, I helped start Maker Faire Kansas City while I was still at the Coffin Foundation in 2011. And it's held at a venue it's a 100-year-old train station, and they have a science center attached to it. And the first Maker Faire went great, and they decided to create a makerspace. And I left my job to go work there and create the makerspace.
Cool.
And that's the point where I decided, okay, I'm going to buy an Ultimaker original. I've seen them progress up to this point, but I've never used one myself other than seeing it at fairs. And, long story short, we got a second one, and then we got a grant, and then we got a donation. When I left, I worked there for 5 years before joining Ultimaker. We had 15 Ultimaker 2s and 2 originals. And so we used that in an educational setting for classes up to 30 and the public. And so I really delved deep into the Ultimaker community and learned how to maintain printers. If a software bug popped up, I knew it because I was in the middle of a class. So I started to participate with them, and I would actually travel to events like Maker Faire and sort of work in their booth, explaining how I used it in that context. And then I'm trying to think, 2014 is when they started to produce and manufacture in the United States. And I started to know people that were being hired and just came on board and sort of switched from the educational world to the business. And so it's just grown, and it's all been from the same community. The same folks that I was associated with in the early MakerBot community are now all still doing things in different companies, but still 3D printing related. So
yeah, that's awesome.
And so now with groups like the Facebook group, it's just nuts with 30,000 people. And
So it's kind of been like a organic thing.
It has. I didn't plan it. I didn't think I should. Yeah, it just evolved. Networking and who you know, and just keeping in touch with people, and wanting to see this desktop industry grow. And
yeah. And you've seen it from the very beginning. Do you have any ideas of where it might go? Do you see some trends?
Well, and it's interesting. I feel like there's definitely a few parallel tracks. We have companies like Ultimaker that are, they're a price premium. They're not $300. And they are on that track, and businesses are buying them, sometimes 20 at a time.
Yeah. And
then there's another track. There seems to be maybe like a low, medium, high as far as budget and quality and accessibility. Yeah. I mean, if we would have had access to a $150 or a $300 printer and it worked back then the way it does now, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, we're also not ashamed to tell people, a lot of times we're people's maybe second or third printer because they got started that way. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like buying a computer. You don't sometimes buy a $2,500 or $3,000 computer first.
Yeah. But sometimes the analogy I use is like my phone. I have Android devices and I like to play with it, but I keep going back to iPhone because it has to just work. When you need it, you need it, and you don't want to be thinking about it. You just want to have it there and it work. And the reason why I moved to Mac was because I couldn't reliably get Linux working with my Wi-Fi adapter back, 12, 13 years ago. So I got a Mac because it had BSD Unix on it.
Yeah.
And, you pay a premium for that, but also I can go to an Apple store and get same day help. And, that's, if you're looking at it for a business, you don't want to be tinkering with the machine. You want it to work when you tell it to print, and if anything does go wrong, if you have problems that you can't figure something out, you want to be able to get somebody to help you, right?
Right. And that's what would happen. So at the Science Center, it's a ticket-based organization. So you have daily visitors, but then we also had classes who would, ahead of time book sometimes 200 or 300 students, and we can't have them show up and all of a sudden this printer busts a heater wire or something like that. So we did have to justify, let's get this $2,500 printer instead of a $500 because we can't have any surprises. It's the same way in a business. Someone has some prototypes to do, or what we're seeing a lot of is instead of one big industrial machine, people are buying multiple machines and sort of parallel processing, so they can run maybe 3 versions at the same time, make some decisions, and then go through and make. You can't have that interrupted by any sort of error.
Yeah, and there's repeatability. If they're making a prototype, they need to be sure what they're getting out is what they'll get next time.
Right. No, it's true. So going forward, it seems like customers want more and more advanced technology, but they want the price to drop, which isn't always compatible. But I think it's a great goal, because ultimately we don't want to end up being the same thing as industrial printers, which may or may not have those features they're talking about. But so I'm just excited to see innovations wherever they come from. So.
Yeah, so one of the things we're looking at is multi-material. So the new Ultimaker has a dual head, and that idea of having dissolvable support, that is pretty cool, right?
Yeah, right. So it's a reaction to, this has existed in industry, but the way to process it wasn't just water. It was,
chemicals,
warm acids, right? Yeah. And so we've gone into places where educational facilities that were doing that, and that's a huge liability. I mean, people are people, so accidents happen, and environmental concerns. So So yeah, the PVA, once you sort of learn how to use it and store it and work with it, it's just very convenient.
Do you see Ultimaker going to multiple heads, like the new Prusa Multimaterial? I think there's a 4-head version. I did order it, and then I've cancelled my order because I'm waiting to see what Tom and Joel think.
Right. Well, what I thought was interesting is both Tom and Joel teasing something coming from that.
Yeah.
So who knows what's next, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting. I'd like to see I like our head because there's not two nozzles. I mean, there are two nozzles, but one, moves out of the way.
Yeah.
Which I thought was neat. And it's just a simple mechanical switch,
yeah.
which I thought was elegant. But I like the systems where they're backing out the material, then forwarding one. I like that multi-material.
Yeah.
I feel like there's something there that could happen between those two mechanisms.
Yeah, and there's also the one that just released that has a kind of inkjet aspect, so it's multiple colors in the.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see that because that's. I'm hoping that's at Maker Faire. That's pretty impressive to see.
Yeah. So we're looking at the hardware right now and the next steps, but in some ways Ultimaker seems a little bit old-fashioned in that it's got a small print bed and it's 3 mil
Sure.
filament. So is there any reason why they've stuck with that size and that dimension of filament when everybody seems to go to 1.75 and looking at the 250 mil and 300 mil bed sizes?
I don't know if there's a specific reason. I think it's an evolution. I mean, they've been really good about trying to not dead end a product line. I mean, we only just now last year stopped producing the Ultimaker original. And that was really so that we could align and have the same electronics and everything. So now the Ultimaker Original Plus, it's the same electronics as the 2 Plus, which means you can, any sort of modification or upgrade that exists for the 2 Plus, you can put on this Ultimaker Original. So I think it's just an evolution. I mean, would a future machine change? Maybe. I mean, in some ways it would make things easier. I haven't had, and then the size, I think that's a common request, even for businesses. They love the parallel processing and, big print farms, but just want to print bigger things. I think that seems to be a common request from everybody, businesses or not.
Yeah, it seems that there must be some pressure there, because one of the great things about an Ultimaker is you can leave it for 40 hours and not expect to come back to a fire or spaghetti, right? Whereas, I've got my CR10 and it's great because it's big, but so far I haven't printed anything huge because I know that if I leave it unattended for more than a day, I'm going to come back to potentially spaghetti, and it works great, but it isn't that Ultimaker confidence, right? Right.
So yeah, if they develop a product that's bigger, I'm sure that there must be new challenges with something that massive, something like, I can't think of something big rep and some of those that are a meter cubed, I don't think we would do that, but
I'm thinking 250 is the next size that they would look at, right? Because it's 200 currently.
Right.
But
I think
even then, right. I mean, there's I know there's the enclosure aspect to an Ultimaker and there's the electronics. So, it's not just the print size, is it? It's the amount of space it takes on a desktop. So maybe that's an aspect that they're considering.
Sure. And I'd like to see, I'd like to see several sizes. I don't know. I do think they're going to keep evolving. I mean, we have an active engineering and R&D, and they're really serious about listening to customers. I mean, so I've heard these requests too, and when I get them and say, hey, so-and-so architect would love a little bit bigger. A big one is shoe designers.
Oh, right, yeah.
So in an Ultimaker, I think we can fit at least in a US size 7 or 8.
Yeah.
well, there's bigger shoe sizes out there.
Yeah,
so.
you literally need to be able to fit a foot.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And so those are, I think, reasonable requests from an industry that's like, I really want to use your machine, but I can't fit my designs without a crazy angle,
Yeah, I think that size in a predictable, repeatable machine, I think it would be, sorry, pardon the pun, huge.
Right. No, I think the need is there and the audience is there, and so I think the option should be
300 millimeter squared with a 1.75 mil option, please.
Okay.
That's my request.
Okay.
So let's talk about Cura, because this is my personal opinion. Simplify 3D was leading the market, and then they kind of dropped the ball with not having any huge updates for about a year. And in the meantime, Cura and the Prusa slicer seems to have all this development and innovation and changes happening. So is Cura a priority at Ultimaker? Is it something that they're really pushing to progress?
I mean, absolutely. There's, I don't remember how big the software team is, but there's a team of developers. And when you look at it, especially if you use an Ultimaker, it works hand in hand with the materials, hence the settings, and the hardware and the firmware. So they're all working together. So I think it's been incredible. It wasn't ever a year, but it was longer than once a month. I mean, we're getting updates once a month.
Yeah.
Like, hey, here's the final version. And then next month it's like, hey, here's a beta for the next one.
And it's still open source. Again, you've got a team working on it, but you can actually go to the repo and get the code.
Right. So what's been great is people who are super hardcore can submit issues, and many times the solutions, and they get incorporated.
Yeah.
And not everyone has the capability to do that. Some people just want to say, hey, I'm noticing a weird bug on retraction or something.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a priority. I mean, the marriage of the hardware, the software, and the materials has to work so that you have that great out-of-box experience.
It's like the Apple experience again. It's that integration of hardware and software that you can tune it. You can bring the two together. Yeah,
it's really, I mean, people want everything. It's impossible for us to make profiles that work for every situation under the planet. But generally, they will work. Yeah. I mean, the good and bad part, you mentioned the PVA, is people now assume you can orient the craziest geometry in any orientation you want. And yes and no. Yeah. I mean, you learn
it's
that.
Not lost casting. It's
right. I mean, I've seen this mainly at educational.
Yeah.
Is they're like, it's so point and click. We're like, well, yeah, but let's try and teach you along the way. So that's also where the community, like the Facebook groups and the forums, will help folks.
Yeah, I've seen that myself. I sell a 3D printing online class, and I've had people ask about all the stuff I go into with troubleshooting. They say, well, can't you just have the education be about the 3D prints rather than the maintenance and the troubleshooting of the printer? And I have to say, for 99% of people, they spend most of the time fixing the printer rather than printing.
Sure.
But part of it is still, even with a really good printer, part of it is knowing what will and won't likely print well. And orientation is a big part of it. You see people in the forums all the time, and it's like you could cut the print time, not just the quality, but the print time half the time by orienting it correctly. Right.
Not having a huge mass of support material
or a full bed of stuff that's going to knock into each other and the sports are going to fail. And
right.
So do you think the software is being pulled in two directions? There's the just print side that you mentioned, and then there's all the advanced stuff that people are wanting. Do you think that the two conflicts? Because like Prusa now has two packages. They have the slicer, which you can do everything, and then they have basically a point and shoot version, right?
The control or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it. Yeah, I mean So for us, it's the recommended or custom. I think you have to have a solid starting point. The problem is consumers are consumers. So we have a sheet on the top of every box as you open it that says, hey, please check out the app or the website. Nobody does that. They take it, they throw it across the room, they unpack it, they follow the on-screen dialogue on the printer, they plug in Cura, and they just go. So it's very hard to convince people to educate themselves, but it also should just work out of the box. So if we encounter something, it's sort of like a focus group, and you see that they're, I don't know, looking for something or trying to do something with the menu or can't find something in Cura, that's things we should be aware of. But once we tell people, like, every setting in Cura has an explanation on the website, and here's where to find it. So if you have a question, or just hover over the setting and see if, it makes sense. My point is just, it is hard to get people to educate themselves. They do want it to just work. And so I think that's the reaction you're seeing from Prusa, from Ultimakers. We need to have solid reliability in both arenas, sort of point and click, and then I want to get crazy and do something wild.
Nobody wants to use training wheels, but training wheels are important.
And so you try and do it in a fun way and say, oh, look at this amazing flowalistic print. He used this feature in Cura, and here's how to do it. That's enticing. And so there's nothing wrong with anything you're printing, but if you're learning a little bit, we saw that for a long time with the hairy lions, lithopanes, and you just never know what little feature is going to be the it feature for that particular designer or engineer.
Do you see the Ultimaker going to like a cloud-based system like Printerbot?
I don't think we would do it exclusively. So the first step into that area is the Ultimaker 3 has an app. That's a very simple Cura in the cloud. So it's just very simple. You can upload something from your Google Drive or iCloud Drive and slice it with a bunch of presets. Right. It's very simple right now, but if that were expanded, that's a nice option. Like I would love to see sort of a round trip. Here's my profile, and being able to start something.
So that's another pressure on your development team, that they've got another UX that they have to develop and respond to bug reports and.
Right. So there's, the cloud connected part. I worked with 15 printers, and as convenient as SD cards are, as we see time and time again, people having, computer updates spoil a USB connected printer. 15 SD cards juggling can be a pain. So now that the Ultimaker 3 has an embedded, Linux board, we can start to play around with, networked printers, and you're starting to see that now with Cura, where you can send stuff. But
and that Linux board is it's basically capable of doing like an Octoprint thing of video monitoring and.
Right. I mean, that's what you're seeing happen now. It's a little computer. So the big thing that gave us, in my opinion, was now firmware updates can happen as many times as we want. You're not tied to when Cura comes out. So I thought that was pretty powerful.
It's like Tesla over-the-air updates.
Right. We're gonna send out a switch and you can have a faster something. I don't know.
So, bringing this to a close, because I know you're a busy guy, what are you most excited about over the coming months? Is there anything that you're particularly pumped for?
For Ultimaker? Or
in general, just...
I feel like the momentum is not stopping. I mean, Ultimaker's working on things. I've just been blown away with their growth and speed, and It's just really exciting. We have currently somewhere in the area of like 30 resellers, and those are growing. So that's really cool to see. The industry in general, I think it just seems like a surprise around every corner. I mean, it could be electronics update over here, some materials, the software. In a way, I don't think the hardware has stagnated, but I think a lot of it is stabilizing a little bit. There's only so many gantry designs that are reliable, but there's so much opportunity for software and materials that it can only just help the whole industry. So I don't mind seeing a company come out that's coloring prints with inkjets, because who knows what that kicks off for an idea, or Multimaterial, or whatever latest feature in whatever slicer. Yeah. But I don't feel like any of this is dying and it's all going to go away. We do need to keep having innovations and instability in existing things.
Yeah. It almost feels like we've gone, it's like a repeat of the microcomputer innovations. Like we've gone from the 1970s and 1980s and we're going into the 90s, where it's an appliance now rather than a kit. And
Well, right. The example is in 2010, I bought a cupcake and it had a 100 millimeter bed. Now we can buy sort of the same thing for about $150. Yeah. And it's Wi-Fi and touchscreen, and so we're sort of resetting that timeline and capability. So
yeah, we're even going from 8-bit embedded computers to 32-bit, so it's also parallel there. So what is your favorite print right now that you've seen? We've seen Groots, we've seen Hairy Lions. Have you got a favorite print to finish with?
Oh gosh, my favorite. Well, my latest one is one I'm using right now. It's the Print Plus headphones. A cool, scrappy startup, another Dutch company. Sort of a neat idea. I don't think we've seen many products where part of the fulfillment is you print the rest of the product. Mm-hmm. So, this is a headphone. They send you electronic guts. You customize it. It works fine. It's not Bose. It's not Beats by Dre, but it's incredibly useful. Now I can customize these if I want. I like that sort of idea. Yeah. But other than that, when stuff for fun, puzzles and things around the house. I'm a Star Wars fan, so I have probably a print to-do list like everybody. It's probably longer than I have the rest of my life. But
yeah, that's why we need faster printers.
I know. Well, and that's encouraging. I always try to. I'm not a 3D modeling guru by any means, so but it's inspired me to learn more. I recently trained in Rhino a little bit.
Cool.
It's just fascinating.
Yeah.
But
well, thank you very much for your time. I realise I've had you longer than I promised, so thank you.
No problem. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And thank you all, everybody listening. Please like us, review us, share with your friends, subscribe, and check us out next time. Thanks again.